You ever look at the person sleeping next to you and wonder if they're dreaming about you or if they're just dreaming about the life they think you can give them? It's a heavy thought, man. It's the kind of thing that keeps a man up at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling fan, spinning round and round, wondering if anything in this world is actually real anymore. My name is Terrence. I'm 54 years old and I've spent the better part of his life building something out of nothing. I grew up in a house where the floorboards groaned under the weight of our struggle in a neighborhood where the only thing guaranteed was that tomorrow would be just as hard as today. But I made it. I climbed that mountain brick by brick until I was the one sitting in the corner office of a multi-million-dollar logistics empire called Vanguard Holdings. But here's the thing about success, it's a bright light that attracts a lot of bugs. You never know who's there because they love your soul and who's there because they love your bank statement. I've seen it all, especially here in America, where we're taught that your worth is tied to your hustle and the brand of the car you park in the driveway. I was tired of it. I was tired of the fake smiles and the people who only called me when they needed a handout. So I decided to do something my board of directors thought was crazy. I decided to go undercover in my own life. I parked the six-figure luxury sedan in a storage unit. I took off the diamond-encrusted watch that cost more than a starter home. I went out and bought an old beat-up 2005 Ford F-15. Oh, the kind with the peeling paint and a heater that only works when it feels like it. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in a part of town where the streetlights have been shot out and the local convenience store sells everything through bulletproof glass. I told everyone I was just a warehouse floor manager, a guy working the graveyard shift just to keep his head above water. That's when I met Jada. I met her at a neighborhood block party. She was beautiful, man. The kind of beauty that felt like home. She had this laugh that could make you forget you were living in a cramped apartment with a leaky faucet. We started talking over some paper plates of barbecue, and for the first time in years I felt like someone was actually listening to Terrence the man, not Terrence the chairman. She told me she was a freelance stylist trying to make a name for herself in the city. I told her I was just a guy with some grease under his fingernails and a lot of long nights at the warehouse. For nearly a year we were thick as thieves. I took her on dates that cost me $20 cheap movie nights walks along the river, sharing a bucket of fried chicken on a park bench. I wanted to see if she could find joy in the simple things, and for a while it seemed like she did. She'd tell me that as long as we had each other, the rest didn't matter. I felt like I'd finally found my ride or die. I was ready to give her the world, but I had to be sure. I had to know if she'd still be there if the world I was showing her was all I had to offer. But then the cracks started to show. It started small. A sigh when I pulled up in my rusted truck instead of an Uber Black. A comment about how her friend's boyfriend just took them to Cabo for the weekend while we were going to the local carnival. She started looking at me differently, not with love, but with a kind of growing frustration, like I was a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture she had in her head. The tension reached a boiling point last Tuesday. I decided it was time to drop the bomb to see if our foundation was made of rock or sand. I walked into her place looking like I'd just been hit by a freight train. I didn't say a word. I just sat down on her sofa and let out a long, shaky breath. When she asked me what was wrong, I looked her dead in the eye and told her the biggest lie of my life. Jada, I said, my voice cracking just enough to sound real. There was an incident at the warehouse. Some inventory went missing on my watch. They didn't even let me explain. They fired me, baby. And because of the contract, they're withholding my last 2 checks while they investigate. I don't have a dime to my name right now. I might lose the apartment by the end of the month. The silence that followed was so loud, it made my ears ring. She didn't reach out to touch my hand. She didn't say, "It's okay, we'll figure it out." She just stood there, her eyes going cold and hard like 2 pieces of flint. The warmth I'd spent 12 months basking in just vanished. She looked at me not as her partner, but as a broken appliance she needed to throw out before it started to smell. "Terrence," she said, and her voice was so flat it chilled me to the bone. "I've spent my whole life trying to get out of the struggle. I'm not about to jump back into it just because you can't keep a simple warehouse job. I'm a woman who needs a man with a future, not a man who's one mistake away from being homeless. You're 54 years old. If you don't have your life together by now, you never will." She didn't wait for me to defend myself. She didn't even look sad. She just turned around and started grabbing her things. She walked into her bedroom and I could hear the aggressive rustle of hangers being yanked off the rod. She came back out with a massive suitcase, the wheels clicking loudly against the floorboards as she dragged it toward the front door. She didn't offer a hug, a goodbye, or even a dirty look. She just grabbed her designer handbag, the one I'd secretly paid for through a promotion she thought she'd won, and adjusted her coat with a sharp, decisive flick of her wrists. I sat there on that sofa watching her silhouette framed by the hallway light. She reached for the doorknob, her fingers gripping the metal with a frantic energy. Without a single word, she pulled the door open, stepped out into the cold night air, and slammed it shut so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I stayed there in the dark, listening to the fading sound of her footsteps echoing down the corridor, my hand slowly reaching into my pocket to feel the smooth, cold surface of the black titanium credit card she never knew I owned. It's funny how the world keeps spinning even when your heart feels like it's been put through a wood chipper. After Jada slammed that door, the silence in my little fake apartment was so heavy I could feel it pressing against my chest. I sat there for hours just looking at that black titanium card. It's just a piece of metal, but in this country it's the difference between being treated like a king and being treated like a ghost. I didn't cry. When you've reached my age and seen the things I've seen, tears don't come easy. Instead, a cold, hard clarity settled into my bones. About 2 weeks went by. I stayed in that apartment, still playing the part of the unemployed mechanic. I wanted to see how far the betrayal went. I didn't have to wait long. I found out through the grapevine, meaning a friend of a friend's Instagram, that Jada hadn't just moved out. She had moved up. She was posting pictures from the back of a luxury car, holding glasses of champagne with a caption that said, "Finally found a man who knows my worth. No more settling." The sting was sharp, man. It felt like a physical blow to the gut. But the real kicker came when I saw an invitation on my office desk, my real office desk, at Vanguard Holdings. It was for the annual Harbor Lights Charity Gala, one of the biggest social events in the city. Everyone who is anyone shows up. My assistant had left it there with a note saying I was expected to give the keynote speech as the primary donor. I looked at that invitation, and then I looked at the Instagram photo Jada had posted. She was wearing a dress that cost 3 months of my fake rent, and she was standing next to a guy with a sharp fade and a suit that looked expensive. But if you looked closely the way I do, you could see the fit was just a little bit off. His name was Xavier. And I recognized him. Not from the social circles, but from the employee directory on the 3rd floor. I decided right then and there, I wasn't going to show up as the CEO. Not yet. I wanted to see the mask fall off in public. The night of the gala, the air was crisp, smelling like expensive cologne and desperation. I didn't take the motorcade. I didn't wear the $5,000 tuxedo. I put on the same modest, slightly oversized suit I'd bought from a department store years ago. I walked into that ballroom, and the opulence was blinding. I stayed near the back, blending into the shadows. To them, I was invisible. Then I saw them. Jada was glowing, clinging to Xavier's arm. Xavier was playing the part of the young prince to perfection, flashing a gold watch that I knew for a fact was a company-issued gift for 5 years of service. This kid was a mid-level analyst in my shipping department. Jada spotted me, and her smile turned into a sneer of pure, unadulterated venom. "Terrence," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "Did you get a job serving the hors d'oeuvres?" Xavier let out a mocking laugh. "Is this the guy, babe?" "The mechanic," Jada corrected him, "the unemployed mechanic." "Terrence, this is Xavier. He's an executive at Vanguard Holdings. A real executive." Xavier reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, and tucked a $20 bill into my pocket. "Get yourself a decent meal. On me. Consider it a tip for staying out of our way." The room seemed to shrink. Jada laughed, a high, brittle sound. "You see the difference, Terrence," she whispered. "This is what power looks like. You're just a ghost from a life I've outgrown." I looked at Xavier, who was looking at me like I was a bug. I felt the weight of my real identity sitting in my chest like a coiled spring, but I didn't let it out. Not yet. I just reached into my pocket, took the $20 bill, and slowly folded it. "You're right, Xavier," I said, my voice low and steady. "Power does have a specific look, and sometimes it's the person you never see coming." I turned my back on them and walked toward the VIP green room. I walked past the security guard, who stepped back immediately, bowing his head when he saw the discreet pin on my lapel. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the private lounge. I sat down, poured a glass of expensive scotch, and took a slow sip. Outside, I could hear the roar of the crowd. I knew that in exactly 30 minutes, the master of ceremonies would announce the arrival of the chairman of Vanguard Holdings. I took the $20 bill, laid it flat on the mahogany table, and smoothed out every wrinkle. I didn't run. I just stood there in the quiet, making sure I looked exactly like the man they thought they knew. The amber liquid in my glass caught the dim light of the VIP lounge, shimmering like the gold Jada thought she'd finally secured. I didn't rush the drink. Every sip was a reminder of why I'd built this kingdom, not for the status, but for the control. I could hear the bass from the ballroom thumping through the walls, a rhythmic heartbeat of a world that judged a book by its cover without ever bothering to read the first chapter. I set the empty glass down on the mahogany side table right next to that crisp $20 bill Xavier had used to try and buy my dignity. It sat there like a lonely white flag, but I wasn't the one surrendering. I stood up and walked toward the heavy velvet-draped doors that separated this sanctuary from the lion's den. My reflection in the polished brass handles showed a man in a cheap suit, but my eyes looked like flint. I stepped back out into the hallway, the cool air of the corridor hitting me as I bypassed the main ballroom entrance. I needed to see them one more time before the world shifted on its axis. I needed to see the arrogance in its natural habitat. I found them near the buffet, surrounded by a circle of aspiring socialites who were hanging on Xavier's every word. He was mid-sentence, gesturing wildly with a champagne flute, acting like he owned the very air he was breathing. Jada was leaning against him, her eyes scanning the room with a predatory hunger, looking for the next person to impress or the next person to look down on. When she saw me approaching from the side, her face didn't just sour, it twisted into a look of genuine disbelief. "Still here, Terrence?" she hissed, stepping away from the circle just enough to intercept me. "I thought I told you this wasn't your league? You're like a shadow that doesn't know the sun has gone down. Go home, before I have security escort you out and make this even more embarrassing than it already is." Xavier turned his head, a smirk spreading across his face like an oil slick. "Hey, look, it's the working-class hero back for more. Did that 20 not cover your bus fare, old man? Or are you waiting for the leftovers to be packed up?" The group around them chuckled, a shallow, rehearsed sound. I didn't flinch. I just looked at Xavier. Really looked at him. I saw the slight tremor in his hand as he held that glass, the way he kept glancing at the entrance to the VIP section. He was terrified of being caught living on borrowed time and stolen bravado. He was a small man in a big suit, and for a fleeting second I almost felt sorry for him. But then I looked at Jada, and that pity turned into a hard, cold resolve. "I was just admiring the suit, Xavier," I said, my voice carrying just enough weight to cut through his laughter. "Vanguard Holdings gives those out to the employee of the month in the logistics division, right? Or did you have to wait for the 5-year anniversary to get that watch?" Xavier's face went from pale to a deep, bruised purple in 3 seconds flat. The champagne flute in his hand shook so hard the liquid spilled over the rim, staining his white cuff. The people around him went silent, their heads swiveling between us like they were watching a tennis match where the underdog just landed a devastating serve. Jada looked confused, her gaze darting between Xavier's panicked expression and my calm one. "What are you talking about, Terrence?" she snapped, though I could hear the first seeds of doubt scratching at her voice. "Xavier is a partner. He's the one who handled the Port of Savannah expansion. He's the one who handled the paperwork for the Savannah expansion," I corrected gently. "In a cubicle on the 3rd floor, near the break room." "Right, Xavier. I believe your supervisor's name is Mr. Henderson. Tough guy, but fair." Xavier tried to find his voice, but it was buried under a mountain of caught-in-the-act terror. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just a bitter, broke old man trying to start trouble because you lost your girl to a better man." But the crowd was already backing away. In a room like this, the scent of a fraud is more offensive than the scent of poverty. Jada's hand dropped from Xavier's arm, as if he'd suddenly turned into a snake. She looked at him, her eyes wide, searching for a lie that would make it all okay. But Xavier couldn't give it to her. He was staring at the floor, his bravado leaking out of him until he looked as small as the cubicle he came from. Before she could scream or he could run, the house lights dimmed and a spotlight hit the main stage. The master of ceremonies stepped up to the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers, calling for everyone's attention. The time for the games was over. The theater was closing and the real world was about to come crashing through the ceiling. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC announced, his voice filled with a rehearsed reverence. We are honored to have with us tonight the man whose vision and leadership have made this evening possible. A man who believes that the true measure of a person is found in their character, not their clothes. Please join me in welcoming the chairman and founder of Vanguard Holdings, Mr. Terrence Vance. A heavy silence fell over the corner of the ballroom where we stood. Jada's breath hitched a small choked sound that died in her throat. She looked at the stage, then back at me, her brain trying to bridge the gap between the man she'd kicked out of her life and the name being spoken over the speakers. Xavier looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for a mercy he hadn't earned. I didn't say a word to them. I didn't need to. I simply reached up and straightened my tie, the cheap fabric feeling like silk under my fingers. I turned away from their crumbling world and began to walk toward the stage, the crowd parting like the Red Sea as the realization began to ripple through the room. I could feel Jada's eyes burning into the back of my neck, a mixture of shock, greed, and a dawning horrific regret that I knew would haunt her sleep for years to come. I climbed the stairs to the stage, the spotlight, finding me blinding and honest. I turned to look out at the sea of faces, finding those two specific spots of misery in the crowd. I stood behind the podium, gripping the edges of the wood, feeling the power of the room shift entirely into my hands as the applause began to swell like a rising tide. Standing behind that mahogany podium felt different than all the times before. The glare of the spotlight wasn't just light. It was a truth teller, stripping away the shadows and showing everyone exactly who was who. I looked out at the sea of expensive gowns and tailored tuxedos. But my soul was still back in that small apartment, sitting on that worn-out sofa, where I learned the most expensive lesson of my life. The applause eventually died down, leaving a silence so thick you could hear a diamond pin drop. I didn't start with a joke or a thank you. I just stood there, leaning into the microphone, letting the weight of my presence settle over the room like a heavy blanket. A few weeks ago, I began, my voice steady and low, echoing through the high ceilings of the ballroom. I was told that I was a weight around someone's neck. I was told that at 54 years old, if I didn't have my life together, I never would. I paused, letting those words hang in the air. I saw Jada in the third row, her face so pale it looked like porcelain about to crack. She was trembling, her hands clutching her gold clutch so hard her knuckles were white. Next to her, Xavier looked like a man standing on a trapdoor just waiting for someone to pull the lever. In this country, we talk a lot about the American dream. I continued, my gaze moving slowly across the room. But we forget that the dream isn't about the gold on your wrist or the title on your business card. It's about the heart that beats underneath the clothes. We've become so obsessed with the glitter that we've lost the ability to recognize the gold. Being us, I spent the last year pretending to be a man with nothing just to see who would love me for everything I actually am. And tonight I got my answer. I looked directly at Xavier. The boy looked like he wanted to vanish into the carpet. Success isn't something you can steal, son. You can wear the company watch and you can lease the lifestyle, but you can't fake the character it takes to build it. Integrity isn't a suit you put on for a gala. It's the skin you live in every single day. I turned my attention to the head of my legal department, who was sitting at the front table. Mr. Henderson, I believe we have a mid-level analyst in the logistics division who has been misrepresenting the firm and utilizing corporate expense accounts for personal theatrics. Please ensure his desk is cleared by Monday morning. We don't have room for ghosts in this machine. The gasp that went through the room was collective. Xavier's knees actually buckled and he had to grab the edge of a table to keep from falling. But I wasn't finished. I turned my eyes back to Jada. She was staring at me. Her lips parted, her eyes swimming with a desperate, frantic kind of hope, the kind of look a person gives you when they realize they just threw away a winning lottery ticket. I saw her move as if to step forward to say my name, to try and fix the unfixable. And to those who think that love is a transaction, I said, my voice softening but growing sharper, I want to thank you. Thank you for showing me that the best investment I ever made wasn't in stocks or real estate. It was in the truth. I paid for a few tacos and a lot of cheap movie nights to find out that my poverty was actually my greatest protection. It kept the vultures away so the eagles could find me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the $20 bill Xavier had tucked into my jacket earlier. I held it up for everyone to see. I was given this tonight as a tip to stay out of the way. I'm going to donate this $20 to the foundation tonight, because even a small amount of money when given with the wrong intent can buy a man the clearest view of his future. I stepped back from the podium as the room erupted. This time the applause didn't feel like empty noise. It felt like a roar of realization. I didn't wait for the handshakes. I didn't wait for Jada to fight her way through the crowd with her apologies and her "I didn't know" excuses. I walked off that stage through the wings and straight out the back exit where my real driver was waiting with the door open to a silver Maybach. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked out the window and saw Jada standing on the sidewalk, the wind whipping her gold dress around her legs. She looked small. She looked lost. The air in the car was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time in a year, it didn't feel lonely. I pulled out my phone and dialed my sister's house. When she picked up, I just smiled. "Hey sis, put the kettle on. I'm coming home and I've got a hell of a story to tell you."